What did you say about taxes in that campaign?
I was against them. I didn't like taxes, but I said you can't get rid of the income tax, but I said you got to have a tax position here that's competitive. At that point, a number of people, very much like now, a number of businesses had rated New Jersey as one of the worst states to perform in. And part of it was taxes. Part of it was just climate. Part of it was they didn't think they were treated very well. And the economy was the issue in a recession. And we had an economy that was really going downhill, and you could see jobs disappearing almost week by week. And so every single thing I said in that campaign had a basis in the economy. When I talked about the environment, I talked about the environment in terms of having a place people wanted to live. That if you didn't preserve open space, you didn't have clean water, clean air, and so on, we've got to attract businesses, we've got to attract people. When I talked about exploding the budget on tourism, I talked about it because it was our largest employer in the state. And we couldn't let that go. We had to keep it. When I talked about the arts, I talked about bringing in $3 for every one that you spent on the arts and why we were so cheap on the arts. It was how much it was hurting, particularly urban economies. When I talked about cities, I said if we don't revive the cities, you're never going to really revive the state's economy. That if you're really going to do it, you've got to start where the people need the jobs the most. And that's the cities. And every single thing I talked about education in terms of the economy. I'd always been interested in education, but I turned about, if you don't educate, the one thing that we have in New Jersey is we have an educated citizenry. That's how we compete with the right-to-work states in the South, because even though we have higher salaries and higher pensions and all of that, there's a much more educated workforce, and we could show that and demonstrate it. So education is very, very important, particularly education of people who are economically disadvantaged, because we're wasting them otherwise. and the economy is going to have to take educated people. And so everything I said about higher education, I talked about the nexus between higher education and the research facilities in New Jersey, the drug industry, all of that. Every single thing I said in that campaign had its roots in bringing jobs back to the state. Some of them long-term, some of them short-term, but everything.
Is it possible to say what Florio was offering the public, or what issue he highlighted?
My memory is Jim was fixated in Washington. He was very, very opposed to Reagan's economic policy. Just thought it was wrong. That's what he wanted to talk about. So we ended up, that first debate, a lot of the debate was on Ronald Reagan, not about the state, about what Ronald Reagan's, what supply side economics was. And
were you a supply sider in that campaign?
Oh yes, oh yeah. I was the first supply side, one of the first supply siders in the country. At that point, I'd read Laffer, I'd read all of that stuff, and I believed it. I still believe that if you don't simulate the supply side, and particularly in states, it's not gonna work.
If you lower taxes, you increase revenues?
You can, yes, because and just the opposite. If you raise taxes, particularly beyond that of the neighboring states, you lose revenues, and that it's very much a balance. You can. I always felt, I don't know if I said this in the campaign, but I always felt as governor, when I needed to worry about taxation, I'd always look at what Connecticut was doing, Pennsylvania was doing, New York was doing, Delaware was doing, because there was a states around us who were competing. If somebody wanted to move down to a right-to-work state in the South, you couldn't compete with that if that's what they really wanted to do. But particularly when people leave New York City, a lot of them don't want to leave the area. So it's New Jersey, or it's Connecticut, or it's Pennsylvania, or Rhode Island, one of those states. So I always looked very carefully at what their tax structure was and made sure that our tax structure was just a little bit below them. And that's what I meant by supply side in the states. I'm not sure it always works at the federal level. In the states, it does. You've got to make things incentives. People do operate on incentives, and if you're thinking about locating a business here, one of your big costs is taxes. One of your big costs is transportation. When you look at what the costs are that these businesses, and if you can make sure those costs are lower than neighboring states, help enormously. I mean, when I was elected, it was the middle of the worst recession since the Great Depression. We had a billion-dollar budget deficit, which in those days was a lot of money. I cut a business tax or two in my first year, in the face of that. Just simply to see, it was signed to the business community that things were changing, and we had to start to do things to get them back interested in the state.